Hey everybody, yesterday on June 22nd, we're filming this on the 23rd of June, we made some big announcements to our church.
Yeah.
Some shifting of seats and things that are happening. And shifting seats is actually intentional language. We'll get into that just in a moment. But we made some announcements around some big decisions that are happening here at Base Church. This is a follow-up conversation. We actually hosted one of these conversations on our last team night. In longer format. And because of a Sunday morning and the main purpose of a Sunday morning in our gatherings or a Sunday evening, we didn't have as much time to get into kind of the nitty gritty or the philosophy of how we view leadership here at Base Church. And so if you're listening right now, this isn't just to make the announcement. Many of you that are tuning in right now have already heard the announcement. But it's also just a conversation on leadership and how we view leadership here at Base Church. And I think it's going to be encouraging to anybody that attends Base Church who's interested in the decisions and even some of the why behind the decisions that we're making. But also to anybody that's tuning in that's from another church, for you to get a glimpse into how we do leadership here at Base Church. And one of the, or some of the most important components that we think about, especially as we have experienced so much growth recently and as we continue to grow. You know, I think back to when Em and I arrived in the city to start pastoring. We were here 11 years ago. So in 2014, we arrived here in Waterloo. And from that point until now, I don't think I would have ever imagined that God would do what he's doing, both at Base Church, but also through our leadership. Yeah. And when we first stepped in, we had 30 students that were part of a reboot or a relaunch of a ministry. And where we find ourselves today, or if I just bring it back to our launch at Base Church, we actually launched Base Church with 900 people, and that was regular people that come on Sundays. You know, we're not fudging the numbers. Like, we have 900 people that call Base Church home, and 300 that attend on a Sunday. We have we had 900 people that were attending on a Sunday, and now we're upwards a year and a half later, just under a year and a half, of about 1,500 people that call Base Church home. In addition to that, when we launched Base Church, we had 30 small groups. We call them home bases here at Base Church. And more recently, we look at our numbers, and we have 81 home bases with over 1,000 people actually in a home base, actively involved in a home base across our church. When we look at some other numbers that are encouraging, we started this year with 72 baptisms in the first 12 days. Yeah. And even just in the last 2 weeks, we have baptized another 30 people. Wow. I'm kind of rounding that number. But we do baptisms every single month in our church. And so as these types of things begin to happen, you think about the growth over the last year and a half from 900 to 1,500 on a Sunday, from 30 home bases to 81 home bases to 130 baptisms last year to already not even halfway through this year, already being probably close to 200. God's doing some incredible things across our church. But when incredible things happen, and I think a lot of people want growth. I even just think about our budget. You know, when we first started in ministry, Emma and I think our annual budget was like $100,000. And you dreamed of the day where you could hire on more staff and have, you know, what if we ever had $1 million budget? And now that we far surpassed that as a church, the truth is that you got more people, more problems, more money, more problems, more anything. Yeah. And there's more logistical things to consider and to work through. You know, I even just consider some of our Heart for the House numbers that we've seen recently, 1.3, rounding it out again. Coming in this past year, I think it was closer to 1.2. What we actually see is that while that's a big number for maybe even some people listening, maybe outside of our church, but also inside our church, these might not be numbers that you've ever heard before. The reality is that if we just fixed the roof on the building we're currently sitting in, all the HVAC units, and did some painting, that's $1.2 million. Right. And so, you know, when we talk about these things, we're not talking about them like, whoa, look at us and look what we're doing. In many ways, we're actually just responding to what God's doing in our church. And when we respond to what God's doing in our church, things begin to change and new needs begin to present themselves as you continue on in leadership. So more recently, one of the things that we wanted to address was this idea that we wanted to make sure that everybody was in the right seat on the bus. So Jim Collins, he has this wonderful little bit in his book, Good to Great. He actually continues it in Beyond Entrepreneurship. And currently I'm working through BE 2.0 is the short form. And he continues this idea, but he kind of talks about how any leadership journey is a journey that can be akin to a road trip. And the thing that is more important than what seats you find on the bus of a road trip is actually who's on that road trip. And then even the who is more important than the direction that you're headed in. Yeah. And so when we look at these ideas, when we started Base Church, it was quite clear that we had the right people on the bus. We had merged 2 staff teams that had great histories here in the region of Waterloo. Mm-hmm. And we knew that we had the right people on the bus, but we also knew that it was going to take some time to figure out whether or not everybody had the right seats. Mm-hmm. Now, this idea of having the right people on the bus is called the first who principle. And really, if you're going to accomplish anything in leadership, you're going to accomplish anything when it comes to trying to accomplish a goal, the thing is that the most important thing is not the what. The most important thing is not the direction. The most important thing isn't even sometimes the why, but actually having the right people on the bus, it actually accomplishes the things that you want to accomplish. Those people are going to ask the right questions. They're going to ask the what question. They're going to ask the why question. They're going to ask what direction are we headed in question eventually. And we have all those things pretty clear, but we've now progressed to a place in our church where we've begun to ask, okay, we've got the right people on the bus. We've followed the first 2 principles. We have the right who's on the bus. And we've established the direction we're going to drive in. Now, do we have everybody in the right seats to accomplish the things that God is calling us to do? And so we're going to get in a moment because that's some of the exciting stuff of where we're going, why we're going there, what we're doing, and all the rest. But some of the who's are switching seats right now, and not switching seats to put some people at the back of the bus. I mean, in many ways, if you sit at the back of the bus, it's the most fun spot to sit anyway. So there's some people not represented here, and we're not saying they're at the back of the bus, but they have a ton of fun because they have to answer all these decisions and all the rest that are going on in our church. But we are moving seats to ensure that everybody on this journey is actually located in the places they need to be in order to move the mission that God has called us to here at Base Church in the right direction. That's right. And that's what we're here to discuss a little bit. So we're going to go over really quickly kind of where each person that is joining us for the conversation today. We have Brian Ferguson. We have Jared Moore. We have Nate Lambert, who had a failed attempt at redefining himself as Nathan a few years back. But then we merged, and we already had another Nathan as a part of the merge. So just like a good sports team, somebody had to give up the number. And Nate gave up the number in favor of Nathan Turner. So we got Nate Lambert, and then we have Zach Kernishian with us today. And so what we're going to do really quick is we're going to have Brian start and just go over what your role has looked like and what it's going to look like. And then I'll continue to introduce everybody else.
Yeah, this is an exciting conversation. We are all eager to step into it and step into our new roles too. And I've been the location pastor at our Bloomingdale location since the merge. Yeah. And as we've talked about this shifting around and where our gifts, what gifts God has given, what skills we have, is I'm excited to step into a new season and really a new role at Base of pastoring our pastors is what we're calling it. Yeah. Our pastors are our home base leaders. Yeah. And that's our small groups. And so I'm eager to bring what God's put inside of me and over 30 plus years of ministry and walk with our home base leaders and caring for them, but pastorally, but also equipping them to know how to shepherd and pastor their home bases. Yeah. So that's the big part of my role is going to be. We've also been talking about me in the physical, moving into the grandfather stage of life. That's obvious. With 5 grandkids, 6 on the way. And then, but thinking of how that works spiritually. And I affirm what we heard that spoken over you in our 12 nights at the beginning of the year of your father heart for this house. Yeah. And I sensed a shift in me at that time of I'm going to be doing something different. And so I'm excited to step into this spiritual grandfather role and just bring whatever that wisdom, strength, experience is and speak into people's lives and home bases. So it'll involve Rebecca and I pastorally being available, kind of like a chaplain too. We're using that phrase. Yeah. That's part of my portfolio, whether it's weddings or helping with funerals or crisis emergency situations here at Base. We are willing to be available and step into those as well.
Yeah. And if you look at Brian right now, you could see him. He's quite a young grandfather, but as I am, quite a young father. And being able to step into this new season with so much energy, but also focus on the giftings that you have. And we'll get to that in just a moment. We're really excited for the change that is coming for you, but also the impact that it's going to have on our church. And so one of the things that any church that continues to grow should be looking at is you have certain like local roles and then you have central roles. And these central roles are meant to help the entirety of the church, whereas kind of local or area responsibilities kind of focus on a specific group or set of responsibilities. And one of the convictions we had as Base Church has grown, and we currently have 3 locations, as you're going to find out through all of the location pastors kind of introducing themselves. We also are looking to expand to more locations. And so getting a gifting like Brian and the gifting that he holds on more of the church is something that we actually just see in the best interest, not only of Brian and Rebecca, as much as we like to just, sometimes be self-interested in the roles we step into. This is also something that's going to be extremely beneficial and healthy for the church overall. Yeah. Okay, Jared, introduce what you're kind of doing now and what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, so currently, my wife Beth and I, we've been the location pastors at our city location. And so we've been there basically since we joined with you and Emma back in the day. We kind of started at the evening service and then launched the morning service. Yeah. We're kind of through all the iterations and variations of that. And so for about 6 or 7 years, we've been doing that. And then also been supporting a little bit with some things like worship and some of the central side of things. So what we're stepping into in this new season is actually coming over to Bloomingdale to be the location pastors there, which is really exciting and big shoes to fill, but we're really looking forward to what God is going to do. And then on the other side of that is taking a little bit more ownership with some of our central ministries that resource across our church, things like youth, things like worship, things like communications. And so things that I've been working on, but kind of taking a next step as our church continues to grow, need some stronger systems there.
Good. Yeah, and one of the things that we're realizing as we continue to grow is that at some point amongst all of the locations you have to have kind of a central hub for everything that's going on. Yeah. And because Jared has already been leading a lot of those central teams over at City, with his move to Bloomingdale is our largest facility. Yeah. And that doesn't necessitate, like central doesn't mean most important as much as we have to have a place where people can gather. Yeah. As our locations continue to grow, we want a place where we can bring everybody back together. And Bloomingdale has the greatest potential to do that. But in combination with the gifting you already have, it also makes sense for Jared to lead the central ministries out of this location so that they can continue to resource locations that are to come, as well as locations that we already have. So really, really looking forward to what comes out of that role as well. Nate?
Yeah, so my wife Emily and I, we've been our university district location pastors for the last couple of years. And it's been really exciting, building that over the last little while and seeing what God's been doing there, but also just preparing to say hey, we're going to be launching a Guelph location in the next year in 2026, and we're going to be continuing to launch locations near other major campuses across the province and all of this. And so in the mix of all of that and Jared moving over to Bloomingdale, we're going to be stepping in this new season as the location pastors for our city location, and we're going to be taking on City, which is super exciting. The one thing I've been sharing is, in so many ways, City has felt like home for a long time. Similar to you guys, that being where you've been for most of your history. We were at University District and with the student ministry that you guys were leading, but for a long time, we've been a part of what is the City community and growing up within it and getting married within it and having our first child within it. And our home bases have been City home bases. And so we're really excited to step into a new leadership and a new role and responsibility, but in a community that already feels like home. And what's really cool about that is as we step into this leadership at City on the ground, carrying that as location pastors, it also allows us to continue to kind of carry forward this mission of, hey, let's launch university district locations. Let's reach the campuses of our province. Let's continue to put gas on the fire of what God is doing in the campuses in this city and say, hey, can he do that in other places? We think so. And so we get to still carry that responsibility of leading university district. We're going to be the location pastors at this point for right now still, and getting to have the responsibility of overseeing what's going to be happening in Guelph and the launch there and future university districts to come.
Yeah. Lots of exciting things. Our first plant out of Base Church, of course, both churches that came together to become Base Church, where each church plants themselves. But this is going to be the first church plant out of Base Church. Yeah. And really looking forward to what that's going to look like. So Nate and Emily are city location pastors, but also the University District location pastors. And because of the shift in your role, we've had to make sure that University District is supplemented with some incredible leaders. And that's where I'd like to introduce Zach. And of course, Zach's not alone. And neither of us, and actually none of us are alone in our roles, in our locations, or what we're doing. It's Brian and Rebecca. It's Jared and Beth. It's Nate and Emily. And of course, for Zach and Emma, they're stepping into a new season themselves. So actually, maybe just share where you're at right now. Like, what are your current responsibilities and what are you going to be stepping into? And then what's that exciting thing that's actually coming?
Yeah, that's great. For the past year, I've had the privilege of actually leading on our facilities team. I follow a great trail of people in front of me, like Brian, who is on the facilities team. And I've just been leading with on our Bloomingdale and City location. Kind of we're getting to know the ins and outs of church, which has been really cool. But yeah, me and Emma, wife to be, we're getting married in 12 days, which is really exciting. So I get to represent her today. We'll be stepping in to actually continue to work with Nate at university, becoming the location coordinators for University District.
And how do your roles break down? Like, because you guys are leading together, you're both on staff. That's not always the case across all of our pastors. For Emma and I, it has been since we've started. Cool. But what does that look like practically for you guys? Yeah, so Emma will be leading all of our teams at University District. She'll be working very close to continue to make sure that we're equipped to have a space ready for people to come and get discipled and join on team, which is really awesome. And then I'll be working with our discipleship coaches on discipleship of all of Uni District. So I'll be kind of working with like home-based leaders, student impact or outreach to the city around us. Just really focusing in to make sure that when people come to Uni District that they're getting connected and they're getting discipled, which is really exciting. Yeah. So that's what Zach and Emma are going to be stepping into for the next year, which is, again, the only way to describe it is it's very exciting. Yeah. We're very expectant. But in many ways, this next year is training grounds for you guys, because what are you going to do in 2026? We will be launching Guelph location together, which is really exciting. It's very exciting. So hyped. I've been saying, of course, across all of these announcements, and I said it again, I think last night at University District here in Waterloo, that it's really cool to think of who the who is, right? Who is launching the first location out of Base Church. And I like it because you guys are going to be, I think, 24 by the time we actually launch, both of you. But, some people might see, hey, that's pretty young to do it. I mentioned that, Em and I were 23 when we launched University District here in Waterloo. It was called the Embassy at the time. And in many ways, I think you guys are setting a bit of a precedent, because what we can actually see as we continue to plant churches across the province of Ontario here in Canada, that it's going to be really hard for people to come up with excuses as to why they can't do it. We've got Zach and Emma leading the way, at 24 years old, maybe we will plant somebody younger at some point, but it's really age, as somebody once said, age is but a number, it doesn't equal maturity, but there's a real maturity in you and Emma. And at 24 years old, I think you set a precedent for everybody else that's going to come behind you. And you join the ranks of church planners, within our church. And really cool. It's really cool. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So when you make this kind of announcement on a Sunday, it was heavily coordinated. And I don't know, maybe I'll throw it to Nate. You hold details pretty good. Walk us through, give me 30 seconds, a minute on how we actually visualized making this decision. Again, for our church, this might not be as interesting, but for any pastors that might be watching, how we thought through the communication strategy of this, because all of this happened on a Sunday morning. We had aimed for 10 minutes each service. I think it ended up being 15. I'm looking over at my assistant, maybe 20, 25 here in Bloomingdale. But it needed the time. Just pointing out longer. But walk through kind of the communication strategy, just really briefly, because this might be interesting for somebody.
No, I think it was cool because before we even got to Sunday, there was just these concentric circles of being able to make the decision, bring in key leaders and people involved in all the decisions and have all those conversations, and then bring in staff team, and then bring in our most significant volunteer leaders that a lot of us have been leading over the last little while, and then bringing in anybody who wanted to be there at our team night last week, and sharing that with this large room of like a few hundred people who were now getting to process it and hear what was going on and understand what it was going to look like. And then we got to Sunday. And I think one of the interesting things with it is that we were able to contextualize at each location very well. So we had kind of the story being told. And that's something that you always say is like, people function and think in narrative. And so how can we be telling stories? And so you were able to kind of tell the story of, hey, here's how we came to this decision. Here's some of these shifts that are happening. And then just kind of letting people see those dominoes moving as we walk through it, kind of like we just did here. So on Sunday morning, you brought up at City, it was like bringing up, explaining Brian's role, then bringing up Jared and Beth, and then bringing up Emily and I, and then you guys all rushed over here to Bloomingdale for the 10 a.m. service, and then did the same thing, but bringing up Brian and Rebecca, and then bringing up Jared and Beth, and then came back. I think that one was a little bit longer just because of the context of that location, and like, it's just a different context it probably needed to be, and then coming back to City, doing it again there, and then doing it in the evening of kind of just these like, letting people see the dominoes fall and bringing different people up and speaking to each person at each time.
Yeah, that's right. I think when I think through the mind of a leader, one of the things that often kind of comes into our hearts or into our minds is fear begins to drive communication.
Right.
And so even as you begin to explain the concentrical circles, I think that it's important to know. So it started, this decision has been in the work, these decisions for months. Most of the four of us have been a part of those discussions. And then when we knew Zach and Emma were actually going to get married and we had this hope for them, we started bringing them into the conversation. But these conversations happened for months. Then we had your leadership team meetings where this was communicated. We communicated with our staff team on a team night and then on Sundays. And now we're doing this podcast. So you can just see that the concentrical circle is getting bigger and bigger. I think the fear that often comes in for a leader, and the reason that this often doesn't happen in many scenarios, is that when you start off in those initial conversations, everybody's so afraid that the information is going to leak either before a decision's actually made, before you've solidified everything, before all of those things. And then when you go out the next concentrical circle, you go, well, these are way more people and way less control on whether or not they actually do listen to us and whether or not they share. And I would just encourage any leader that's listening right now, even in our church, to weigh the negatives or the downside to both situations. And so what we could have gone about is just kind of like really secretive conversations. We could have kept it really tight and skipped all of the concentrical circles and just announced it kind of broadly on a Sunday, or maybe in my mind, even worse, just in a format like this. Hey, tune in, announcements coming out. And what that would guard against is the leaking of information. Now, the downside is the leaking of the information. But I would argue that the downside of not doing the concentrical circles is actually greater. Sure, somebody could leak this. In fact, we have some evidence that some people did. And are we going to track them down and talk about it? I don't know. Like, people will eventually show themselves as untrustworthy over time, and we'll just deal with that kind of as a separate issue. But the downside of just kind of like blanket announcing something is you don't get a chance to bring in each of your leaders at each stage of the conversation. And what that doesn't allow you to do is to build trust with the leaders that have been contributing the most across your organization or across the church. And so this approach, the aim was to actually build trust amongst teams. It was to bring them in on the conversation. The other thing it allowed us to do was to pick up on common questions before they hit the masses, so to speak, before the crowd heard it, before the large amount of people heard it. So we were already answering questions as we went along. Any blind spots that we had were figured out in those early stages, so that when we came to actually announcing this, we kind of had our ducks in a row, and we were able to actually communicate with clarity. So you can just imagine, like, this is a big Sunday for us to announce this. And one of the things I've mentioned as the lead pastor of Base Church is, in many ways, the people that are most at stake of getting backlash in this whole process is my wife and I. We lead the church. And if this messes up, if something goes wrong, as much as people might get upset with Jared and Beth for a season, at the end of the day, they're actually upset that Brandon and Emma can't lead this church very well. And so there's a lot on the line in these conversations. And I only mention that not to, either elevate myself or puff myself up in any way, but just to say, because I'm trying to speak to our church right now, but I'm also trying to speak to the leader that's listening, that high stakes doesn't give you a right to have a shortcut to making these decisions.
Yeah.
You can't bully your way through these things. You can't force your way through these conversations. We're months into something, and every leader just kind of wants to get the thing done and kind of wipe your hands and get on with it and just move through it so that we're not stuck on the same thing forever. And yet I think you have to find that balance between quick decisions and the other ditch would be making a non-decision, not just, getting caught up in the conversations and being too nervous to make a decision. You have to find the sweet spot for whatever context you find yourself in, and then just kind of go with it. When we think about the high stakes for everybody else in this room, having this conversation, there's some high stakes involved, when we launched Base Church, each of these guys were in their locations and leading for quite some time. Brian has been at Bloomingdale for 10 years. 6 years in the current role he finds himself in. Jared has been with the church Slate Church that became a part of Base right from the beginning, and has been in this role before. And then through the pandemic, Em and I took it back on. And then after the pandemic, for another 2.5 years, stepped back into that role and has deep relationships with those people. Nate has been a part of what is University District for the last 11 years with Em and I. And even just the shift of, wait, you're not the main person that's going to lead us was kind of really big. So what I want to talk about is just kind of like the reactions from each of our locations. So at Bloomingdale, let's start there. There was a leader, Pastor Steve and Beth Fleming. There was leaders in place that were there for 35 years.
Yeah, they founded it.
They founded the church. And then during that transition, it went to Brian and Rebecca. And that transition had its rocky moments. It had its beautiful moments and all the rest. But it had this kind of historical memory of like, oh, wait, change is difficult, or, change is hard. And now Brian and Rebecca are beautiful part of our church. Steve and Beth, Pastor Steve and Beth, beautiful part of our church right now. So that's not the whole story, but the idea of like trauma lives in the body. It's like trauma also lives in the body of Christ, where as soon as you go to announce change, it's like, wait, how's this one going to turn out? I'd just love to, hear your reflection, and Jared, you and Beth were there as well. Just on kind of how Bloomingdale's received it, not just in the initial announcement, although let's include that, but also in the lobby time, questions you were getting afterwards as, we jetted off to the 11 a.m. at City to make the announcement again.
I think the response from Bloomingdale people was very, very affirming to the narrative, the vision piece that you were casting about what you started this conversation with, about our gifts and being in the right seat. And as we painted that picture, because that's the leadership structure we want to aim toward, fits very much with Ephesians 4 and equipping the saints.
That's right.
And so the saints, each of us being saints as well, and being positioned where our gifts are. And so as you shape that and shared that of Rebecca and I and our strengths pastorally, that casts a vision for Bloomingdale to go, I see how this decision's being made. And you even called out to Bloomingdale saying, hey, where's Rebecca and Brian's strength? And it was in shepherding and pastoring. And that, like, we heard that throughout the room. They just shouted it out. And so that was cool that the people were saying, we can see the Brian and Rebecca shifting into this role. And actually that's the next two congratulations in your new role comments that we got after the service, was people say we could really see this fit with
cool.
you, even though they haven't experienced it in formerly Koinonia or Base Church, but it's a new role that we're really fleshing out, and people could see what we're communicating, where this is where we could go and fit.
That's cool.
I thought it was pretty cool when we announced the change that actually, I believe you guys had a standing ovation. Did they
people
not?
cheered and stood up, and we're excited for it. So that was surprising.
Well, and deserving. If you know Brian and Rebecca, very deserving. Walk us through some of the conversations in the lobby. Like what were people saying? Any questions that came up?
The conversations were just, again, lots of congratulations, and the odd person would be, oh, but are we still going to see you?
Yeah.
And yet we had answered that question as, oh yeah, Rebecca and I are still definitely going to be around and pastoring in this church and in this community. And so people are still getting their minds around, what does this really look like? But lots of affirmation about seeing us step into something new in this way, because that's where our gifts really lie. And we're going to walk it out with God's affirmation in us. So it was very positive.
Yeah, that's really cool. You know, I think that's another thing as leaders we always have to be aware of is, I mean, we communicated really clearly from the platform some of the questions that you were then being asked in the lobby. You know, we mentioned Brian and Rebecca are going to be in Bloomingdale at least 50% of the time. And then you have people asking the first question, but are we still going to see you?
Yeah.
And I think it just speaks to that kind of leadership dilemma we all find ourselves in, which is no matter how much you communicate, people need more communication in order to understand what's going on. I think in many ways, we could have stopped the announcement yesterday when we announced it across our church, across all of our services. But here we are again in podcast format, trying to help leaders that tune in and are interested in what's happening at Base Church, as well as our church, to reiterate things we've already. Why? Because people forget. And it's not that they're bad people. The people coming up to you to ask these questions are not bad people. And they're not intentionally not listening to a major announcement. Like this wasn't, you know, in the middle of worship, just like, hey, quick, we want to quickly tell you about something. This was 20, 25 minutes of clearly outlining this. And yet, you know, even well-intentioned and trying to pay attention people need this reiterated time and time again. And I actually think that's okay. Yeah. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Brian, as well, is, you know, the role that you're going to step into, it's largely based on the pastoral shepherding gift. And a lot of the location pastor goals are kind of built around that apostolic gift. So what we talk about here at Base Church is that each of the giftings, you know, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, all of them are kind of anchored by a pastoral calling. Because if you don't carry that pastoral heart, you can't really do what we do as a church. We're all called pastors for a reason. But one of the things that's needed in that location pastor role is actually more of kind of an apostolic gifting. It's kind of like this hybrid between pastoral gifting and strategic gifting and the raising up of leaders and being able to send them out. And so that's one of the reasons we've made some of these shifts. But the question I wanted to ask you is, you walk with such a humble spirit, with so much hope and belief in the future and confidence that you're not going to be discarded, that God has you and all the rest. I've made a number of leadership changes throughout 11 years of ministry, but also have watched, you know, hundreds of years of ministry of, you know, mentorship through books and other leaders across the country. Talk about this idea that when you make shifts, sometimes people view it as a demotion or they view it as a, you know, because I'm not going to sit in this role I've always sat in. You've been a lead pastor pretty much your entire life. Then through the merge, you're willing to take on a location pastor role. And in this next, you're actually shifting to a completely new role that neither church has actually had before. But you've never once approached it, or even this word demotion has never come out in a conversation. We certainly don't see it that way. But I think, again, we're speaking to our church who might, you know, they read their own insecurities into situations. Then we're talking to the leader that's listening, where you've heard this said back to you. I've heard it said back to me. Well, this just sounds like a demotion. And yet in no way is it that way. So walk me through, as we've been going through this over the last number of months, how you've been processing, maybe even some of those moments, low moments, how you've combated that, but also kind of where you've landed and where you sit with that today.
Yeah. I think my thoughts would come out of what we've discussed, what you've highlighted about
Go for it.
Being all in for the kingdom.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be an employee or a volunteer, or I don't want to be a volunteer of the kingdom. I want to be an employee. I want to be all in, ownership.
Yeah.
And yet I submit my calling, my gifting to God. I've said, God, I'm all in. You place me where you want.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, so a motto that Rebecca and I have walked out for years is, we have nothing to lose because God is the one who places us where he wants us and to use us where he's gifted us. And I actually then don't have anything to prove. I could feel that way even as we did the merge. Like you and I, you're a bit younger than me. I'm like, well, I got to prove that I've got it as well. And I'm like, well, no, like, let me discern where is God calling me to my voice to be and my gifting to be in this merge. And then similar in this transition too. It could be like, oh, I'm replaced by a younger leader. No, part of our motto is to cheer on younger leaders.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's a different age in both of us.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that because we want to create margin. We want to create space so that younger leaders can step in and be with their gifts and serve where God's placed them. So in the feelings of how do I handle the feelings of being pushed to the fringe or being aged out or something like that, is like, no, Lord, you will use me as long as I'm available to you and all in and committed. And so that gives me great security in the kingdom for whatever the future holds.
It's good.
That's good.
Wow.
So go for it, Jared.
Just what I was thinking about while you were talking, Brian, and even to your point of the way that people read their own things and the stuff, just the passage that's going over in my mind is like, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And who are we trying to please in the things that we're doing? It's not ourselves or others, it's God. And so just listening to you, that's the thing that's rolling over and over of like, God's looking at your heart and you're going, I just want my heart to be pure before God. And wherever you lead in that, I'm going to follow.
Amen.
And that's the thing that God honors is that purity of heart.
Thanks,
So
Jared.
yeah.
Very true.
I'm just thinking about how, everybody in our church already knows this about you. You can't just find Brian's anywhere. You can't find Rebecca's just anywhere. And for any leader, as much as you can't find them anywhere, do your best to develop them, and even better yet, become a Brian and Rebecca.
Yes.
Because the idea of this culture, we want people that have a firm grasp on ownership, but a generous spirit, that wherever God you take me, that's all. That's not something we speak about just at our location pastor level. It's something that we talk about across all of our volunteer teams. Even when it comes to sweeping a floor, do it with ownership.
Yeah.
But also, if somebody asks you to do something, like, be open to that. That's literally what Zach is doing right now. He has been sweeping the floor here and doing it with excellence and going through, the difficulties of sometimes feeling disregarded by people in the church that forget you're a human in the midst of doing all of that. and yet open-handed, God, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You get into trouble when somebody has both hands firmly clasped on what they're wanting to do.
Yep.
And that's the culture we ward against. The other thing that just sucks is when you have this kind of culture where somebody does not care where they are. And I think a lot of pastors and leaders kind of want these kind of people because they're yes people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, all they are is they're always just like, yep, no matter what, yep, whatever the pastor says, yep. And as much as you think you want that type of person, you can't build a strong organization on people that don't have conviction. And so you actually want the balance between somebody that's going, yes, I'm open-handed, but also as long as God has entrusted this to me here. And it's why we took months to have this conversation and not me walking into an office one day and going, here's what your new role is.
Right.
I mean, how dishonored. That would be me expecting our churches like this. But also, I have so much confidence going into these conversations because nobody on our leadership team, nobody even in the leadership teams of our locations have this kind of perspective on what's happening in our church. It allows us to walk with a level of humbleness, honor, freedom, and hope that God's going to move in the future.
And confidence that God is leading you. You're not, blown and tossed by the winds of your boss or
That's right.
the people's opinions or anything. No, it's God, the confidence God is leading forward, and you can hear his voice and follow his lead, and it'll fit together with everybody else that he's leading as well.
Yeah.
I feel like we almost need a whole conversation on how you become that kind of person from Pastor Brian. Maybe we'll do that at some point. Maybe this is the launch of an official podcast. I don't know. But, I wanted to touch really quick before we go to the reaction at City. I would ask you how Bloomingdale went, but you were there for essentially just you
just
got a
the
standing
announcement.
ovation as well.
Which is really kind. Like I was not expecting that. I think in all of these announcements, that was the thing that both Beth and I were most not anxious about, but just mindful of going through all of this. I think we knew how City would respond, just being so integrated in that community, and it was. I won't jump the gun on how they responded, but but coming here, we were like, we don't know what to expect, because as much as we've been around during the merge and Tuesday nights and things like that, we've only actually been here on a Sunday morning 3 times since we merged. And so, and those have been 3 beautiful times. We've met so many great people and had a great experience with the community there, but going, man, we have so much to get to know here, and they have so much to get to know in us too. Like we'll see how this goes. And so it was less the standing ovation that was like the meaningful part of it. I mean, they just stood for Brian and Rebecca. I was like, they kind of cornered themselves on this one. If they don't stand again and sell it.
Right. They don't do it now. We got some problems.
But what really encouraged Beth and I as it is when you had said, the next location pastor are Beth and Jared. And as we were walking up, just how quickly the applause and the cheering was. And it's not about applause and cheering. That's not why we're doing any of this stuff. But it was an indicator of, you know, oh, this is like a real palpable sense of great. That's awesome. You know, and that was what, you know, for me, that was the moment I was waiting for, of like, is it going to be golf claps and like, hey, good job, we'll see. But it really felt like an expectation of, we're not just excited about this, but we were behind this and believing in this. And so that was really like settling in my own heart. And Beth and I talked about that afterwards of, you know, we just feel grateful that that's the response, you know, because it could have been a variety of responses, but there's a real gratitude that was the posture.
Yeah.
It's really cool when you have a location that's been around for 41 years and the way that they responded, and even the texts and messages and emails, all that came in response, and even the days leading up through those concentrical circles, the support that came out of it, people saying, we support you, we pray for you, we're praying for you, all the rest. It's really cool. So before we go to City, I want to touch on that one piece of people read their insecurities into others one more time, because I think even as we talk about these shifts, if you're a part of Base Church or you're a part of another congregation and your leadership is making different decisions and moving things around, I think the other thing is it's not just about not reading your insecurities onto that. It's also about not reading your place of work onto the situation as well. The church is an entity unlike any other entity.
Right.
And in the business world, all it's about is up and to the right. It's about maximizing profits for shareholders. It's about getting promotions and oftentimes, as we talked about last night, a uni district, self-promotion and all the rest. But in the kingdom of God, we work off a base assumption that when we get to heaven, and even now, but it'll become even more apparent in heaven, we are all equals before God.
Right.
There is no distinguishing factor between any of us in the eyes of God. Now, does God use different positions to accomplish his will? Absolutely. He uses men and women. He uses... Sometimes it seems like the favor ain't fair, right? On who he's using and why he's using them. Why does God use them and not me?
Right.
All of that is up to, and it's completely out of our hands. We don't get to choose whether or not God's going to use us in that special way. And sometimes all of us can look at different people and be like, man, I wish God would use me that way. We're in charge of our obedience, as Jared often says. We're not in charge of the outcome. But we have to remember that even within the hierarchy of a church, whatever that means, there is actually no hierarchy. Yes, there's communication chains and there's ways in which we need to organize ourselves, and we have to have order in the midst of something that could become quite chaotic in managing thousands of people and discipling them and bringing them into greater relationship with Jesus. But at the end of the day, we're all equal, and that does give a bunch of pastors that are sitting here right now a different perspective on changes within a church than anybody that their main vocation is outside of the church, because it's not something that you have trekked through and rewired your brain for 31 years or 35 years in ministry. Right? Like it's for 31 years, Brian has been reorienting his brain, going, this isn't about me. It's not about me. I'm an equal in the kingdom of it. That doesn't happen at the same rate within a business, within a school, within a hospital, wherever it is. That training takes place from the moment. I mean, I think of Nate. Nate left a job, and it's okay to put this in podcast format, to take on a job that was less than a quarter of what he was making at the workplace, and he was only going up from there. That would have been the lowest place he found himself at the current place of work. He stepped into making less than a quarter of what he was making. That happens the moment you start making that decision. You've already counted the cost. And I think it's just important that, you know, as congregations listening from ours or someone else, that when your pastor communicates, hey, we all believe in this decision, it's important to trust that, unless somebody gives you another reason to distrust that. You know, and I think, you know, one of the things I said to Bloomingdale was, and of course, it doesn't need to be said, but it's showing, hey, like we're being open-handed with this, is if you don't believe me as we're making these decisions that everything's great, then just go talk to Brian. You know, and Brian, you know, is not being held in my office while you have that conversation. He's out in the lobby, or he's, you know, over coffee. But at the end of the day, it's important to put trust in your leaders. They're working on a different wavelength in a healthy church. There are some unhealthy churches out there. But in a healthy church, we're just working on a different wavelength, and we're all going, God, if this is where you have me right now, then this is where I want to serve. And once again, I think we could do a podcast, because the way that you have led over the course of decades is what we want to see out of our church in another 3, 4, 5 decades from now.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting if we go into those conversations more. Yeah, we can talk about our seasons of the lows, because they haven't all been highs and promotions or things like that. There are times when it was scaled back, but God's the same, regardless of where we land. And He's always the provider, and He's always one we can trust in. That was yesterday's message as well out of Proverbs.
That's right.
And so there's lots more to talk about of how do you navigate through that. It's the same God who will lead us through it.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah.
Let's talk about City and the reaction there. I was, I knew that would be one of the more difficult ones, in the sense of Brian gets to be at Bloomingdale for a significant amount of time still. But with the shift from City to Bloomingdale, it's within Base Church, but it also means, you're going to see people 5% of the time that you normally would have.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be difficult. We started off the 9 a.m. at City with probably, in my mind, the most emotional one, but I was still caught off guard by, we make this announcement, we call you guys up, and you and Beth were showing a little bit of emotion.
Oh yeah. And I think I process things. I'm not even 100% sure how I process things. It seems to be I'll do a lot of pre-thinking. I'll get myself to a spot, and then obviously in moments you're just overwhelmed by emotion. And so when we were sharing with the ministry lead team at City, I caught myself going, there's actually quite a bit of emotion here. It was a couple Tuesday nights ago. And then on Sunday morning, it's just the emotion of being, in front of all these people that you have been deep in their lives for many years, walking alongside, and knowing that, we're not dying, we're going to be around, but also we're not going to see them on a weekly basis and be as involved in their lives. It can't be that way. Already with the growth that we've seen at City, we haven't been able to be as engaged with as many people as we'd like to be there, because there's just so many more people. But those that we have been, it's taking on a different season for Beth and I. We're going to put that energy here at Bloomingdale. And so you're kind of processing all of that. And you do that, but then when you're in front of all the faces, you're like, oh, and that person, oh, and that story, oh, and that thing, oh, and that. And so, you're overwhelmed in that moment, both of the gratitude to be able to do life with those people, but also the loss of, like you said, we're flipping that 95 and 5 between one to the other, right?
That's
and
right.
where I've only been here 3 times at Bloomingdale, now it'll probably be similar to City.
Yeah.
And so there'll be great times, but it's different. And so I think you just, the fullness of it is hitting you in those moments. And so, there's definitely emotion for it. And I think that's good. If we were kind of, neutral through all of this, it's a little too open-handed. It's like, hey, buddy,
right.
do you care about this at all? Like,
That's right.
And we did. And so, it was emotional for the 9. And the reality is, City has grown so much in the last year, like so many new faces. So even in the 9, there were so many new faces that just have joined in the last year or 18 months. And so it was kind of a mixed bag, but it was great to sort of have that one be done first, so that you can kind of get the emotions out and then go to Bloomingdale. And that was when, where you're kind of on your toes a little bit, like what's going to happen here. And
that's right.
And so again, very grateful for the response there. And then it was funny going back to the 11. The 11 at City is mostly new people, and it's actually been an area where we've put a lot of attention going, how do we get the 11 to catch the heart of worship and the heart of how we respond to messages? And we've been putting a lot of work in there. So it was funny. It was definitely the shortest announcement of all of them on the Sunday morning. And I was joking with somebody afterwards. I was like, I think half the people in that room didn't even know we were the location pastors there. They're just like, who are these people? And so it almost felt like, let's get on with worshiping God and doing this stuff. So it was good. But across the day at City, they sort of responded the way we had hoped and expected, which was, it's been great. We love these guys. And if we're going to keep doing this stuff, we know that change is a part of what it means to build a growing church. And that community has been through so much change in the last 5-6 years especially, that it's not water off the back, but they've all seen God's faithfulness through change. And I think there's a deep well to pull on of, God's going to do a new thing and it's going to be great. And it's also like the team there is sick and Nate and Emily are sick and they're coming in. So it's not like they're like, wait, what is happening? They're just fired up about, Jenna, Anthony, all these people, they're still going to be here and lead, and Nate and Emily are coming in. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's one of the interesting things. If you consider the growth across our church, City is arguably growing the fastest out of all of them. University District might rival that a little bit.
Talk in the fall, we talk in the summer, kind of varies.
Yeah, that's right. But when we look back a year and a bit ago, we went into a new building after all this change. 8 years ago, you've got an evening church adding morning services, more morning services, a location. You're adding multiple venue changes in there, a pandemic. And then multiple leadership shifts through that whole thing. And then moving after the pandemic to more venue changes into a permanent space, more leadership changes, a merge between two churches. Like, these are some of the most resilient people that you'll ever meet. And they're just used to the pace of change. But with saying that, when we moved into the permanent building, we were about 200, just to round off numbers. And now we sit on a Sunday there just a year and a bit later, because that was April last year and we're in June. So 14 months later, we are seeing, 500 to 600 people. That's a 2.5 to 3 times growth in a year and 2 months. And in some ways, this old adage, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're making this decision to actually move you to another location, which in some ways can bring up a sense of nervousness. Like, are we making the right decision? But I think, just to speak to everybody, when you know that the right decision was for you guys to go to Bloomingdale, you have to have confidence that God is going to bolster you in another area. And that's where Nate and Emily came in, because Nate, who was completely dedicated to University District, and we were kind of, in many ways, had some rigid thinking on it, had to be done with you on the ground instead of, wait, what if we raised up younger leaders to do what we've always done as a church? Moving you over there became quite obvious as time went on, because it's like, oh, Nate is one of our most strategic leaders across our church. And so, I'd love to hear you just speak into some of the things you heard. You were able to stay at both 9 and 11. You were there for the reactions, all the rest. How did City receive the news? Both, mostly you guys coming in, I guess. I can't imagine they're like, yeah, we really wish that Jared and Beth were going to stay here, but...
As a couple of was like really excited, but I'm just kidding.
Finally. We've been waiting for this moment.
People are going to miss you guys a lot. But I think like the biggest thing that stood out to me is I think it's a testament to like your leadership, your and Emma's leadership, and your and Beth's leadership, of just the trust that people have, where it just felt like at City there was just this deep well of trust. And it's almost like, and especially like that's the community of people that's probably tracked with you and Emma the longest out of any single community within our church. And over those years, there has been so much change, but God has been so faithful in every moment of it. I was actually talking to somebody this week who works in fundraising professionally, and they're like, yeah, whenever I look at like the Heart for the House and like when we announce all the vision, they're like, this is like bad fundraising. You guys are committing to way too much. Like, this is so much stuff. She's like, but then you guys always do it. Like, it always happens. Like, God always comes through. And it's just like, I think there's been this culture where people expect the extraordinary to the point that it's almost ordinary of like, God's just going to move. It's going to be incredible. We're going to keep growing. We're going to talk about this big vision, and God's going to see it happen. And there's just like this deep, deep, deep well of trust. And so everybody that we talked to coming out of Sunday was just, like it was almost just like, of course, cool, great. God's good. And like met people who've been there for 5 months as they're like walking to their car, and we were chatting like, awesome, so nice to meet you, this is gonna be great. Talk to people who've been there since like all the way from the student church days and have raised their families up, and they're like, of course, this is what we do, this is gonna be great. Like, it was just like this, like there was like an ease to it across the board. And I think there's obviously like those moments and pockets of people who are really close with you guys personally, and there's those emotional elements to it. And like the love for you guys was so incredibly evident, especially in that 9 a.m. just with the standing ovation that you received there. It just felt like such an honoring thing of like, we love you guys. And at the same time, I felt like that whole location was just like, let's go. And that's like really exciting to step into.
The standing ovation count, if we're counting, is at 2 for Jared and Beth right now. And I don't know if that says anything to anybody around here, but, we got to work on more standing ovations for the rest of us, because, it just kept happening throughout the day. When it comes to that transition, and of course, City, there's obviously so much trust with even Em and I. You mentioned that, Jared and Beth. And I kind of want to move towards University District because there's a change that we announced that in many ways was a non-change from a location pastor standpoint.
Yeah.
But everybody understood that Zach and Emma were going to be taking on the role that Nate and Emily were doing just under a covering. And I was so blessed by the response to Zach and Emma being announced.
Yeah.
Zach, how did you feel? Like, again, was there a standing ovation for Zach and Emma?
Okay, I think it probably counts as like at least 0.5 of a standing ovation.
Was it a sitting ovation?
It was sitting,
Yeah,
but
okay.
like you had to like tell people to stop clapping. It went on for so long.
Well, I think that
So-
the extended
Actually, that's
applause
true.
was for Emma directly. I know
Yeah.
that. She's great.
Nice.
You can tell this guy's about to get married.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
he's not
Let's go.
7
Keep it
years
up.
in.
Come on.
And
I
keep
learned
that up, man. By the way,
Yeah.
I think all these guys would say the same.
What's up, dating?
Deflect the praise to their wife, and you're a good man. So, conversations afterwards, and
Yeah.
when we say we had to stop the applause, like it just kept going.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just like that age demographic but I don't think so. If you were to come
Yeah.
to our church, worship is passionate.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, in the message, I mean, we're pretty subdued. We're, you know, we're just learning the word of God. I mean, these people aren't like hype people, but when we announced that,
Yeah.
it went on for at least a minute,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
in applause is a long time.
It's a long
Yeah.
time. It definitely caught me off guard. I feel like I'm not usually like the man for the spotlight, but I had to make sure that I took a mental screenshot of like, it was so special. Like, don't want to forget all those people cheering us on. And yeah, we had a lot of great conversations. Even I was at Bloomingdale here because I was cleaning, and even just like first and foremost, people from Bloomingdale, people that I look to as for like mentorship who were like cheering us on, which is like means the world to us because like these are people like I care so deeply about. But then obviously at Uni District, we had so many people sending texts and hugs and we believe in you, we're in this together thing. And also we've already had like a half a dozen people that have come up and said, hey, like we are interested in Guelph. We want to be a part of that. Not just because they're hyped about a new thing, but because we genuinely believe that like us, we want to see what God has done in Uni District in Guelph. But I think it's so cool how people are just like, yeah, like we're doing this. And like, there's been so many cool things said.
Explain a little bit, Zach, beyond the reaction, because it was positive. We could go on about that, but it'd be more the same across our locations. Describe to me a little bit, as you and Emma, you're getting married in 12 days. We started these conversations with you, let's just, for brevity's sake, a few months ago. You guys knew in your hearts God was preparing you for something. There was clues along the way, but we needed to know you were getting married before we had the conversation. Walk with me a little bit about how the conversations are going between you and Emma as you consider leading University District, as well as going to launch Guelph. Like, what's God doing in your hearts? How's that dynamic playing out in your
Oh, that's so good.
soon-to-be marriage?
Yeah, I think I was reflecting today just on what this means for us, and both of us didn't grow up in KW. We both came from different areas. She didn't come from a faith background. I came from a kind of dysfunctional faith background where when I came to KW, I was pretty confused with like, do I really believe this? And both of us first got plugged into Slate. Like that was the first church that we ever got plugged into, and just the impact that she's had with her friends and the impact that I've had with people that are still here today. And we just like fell in love. We got baptized at Maxwell's. Like we gave our life to Christ in the exact same spot.
That's cool.
First and foremost, we're just so pumped to be able to like we love bass and we love what's going on, and I think that's just like in our DNA. It's just like what God has done for us. And it's just been able to channel that to not just Uni District now, but like in Guelph as well. We 2 weeks ago went on a date in Guelph, and we're just like, we want to get familiar with like what is going on, and it just even just a sense in us like like we could see, not that we're looking too ahead, like we're so like we love what's going on here, but we could see us fall in love with that city as well. And I was blown away by just the churches there. There's some big churches there. It's a beautiful town. It's a beautiful city. Beautiful campus, and even just right now, God together is working on our hearts, like for what's ahead. And I think it's so cool that as we get married, that we just get to do that together. Like it'll be a lot.
So
but
cool. It'll
so
be a
blessed.
lot, but you're also supported along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I think as we get ready to wrap up this conversation, what we're seeing with Zach and Emma, University District, and then across the ministry lead teams out of our locations, is this real desire to mobilize young leaders and believe in them, not just to say, hey, we believe in you. Could you volunteer in the parking lot for 10 years and then maybe we'll see if there's a spot.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're constantly trying to open up avenues where people can step up into significant leadership spaces. And so, when you actually look at every great company, organization that's out there, this is the very strategy. You find people that are a little bit fanatical.
Yeah.
You know, they have these fanatical person. They're just all in. You find them whether or not they're passionate for the mission that you're on, which you look around, you know, us right now, that's exactly it. And then you give major objectives and just let them loose. You don't micromanage. Like you have to resist the temptation to micromanage along the way.
Yeah.
Otherwise that stifles the passion and even that fanatical in the church sense of people coming to know Jesus. You stifle it.
Yeah.
And you don't allow people to just kind of run with the mission and grow into their own leadership. So just as a final kind of discussion piece, as we talk about raising up future leaders, and we've got so many people kind of in the wings and in the pipelines going, I want to plant a church. I want to work. I want to give my life to the ministry of God. I have this strong desire in me, like proportionately to the rest of our church. We have a huge amount of people that are going, we believe in planting churches across every major municipality in Ontario, and we want to be a part of it. We had a leadership event or afternoon, I guess, at our house with Ben Carahuje out of Cities Church. And we had all of our kind of ministry lead teams from each of the locations come to that. It was last minute. People worked during the day. It was happened during a work day. And somehow, I think 80% of the people found time off work, got there, whatever else. And before we even had time with Ben, as people were coming into our house through our front door, and then after the time with Ben, walking out of the front door, I would say that 90% of those 80% of our ministry lead teams communicated to Em and I, hey, I know we want to plant churches, and I just want you to know either we can plant or be sent with somebody that wants to plant wherever you tell us we want to go.
Yep.
And in some ways, when I hear that, I go like, are we running a cult here? Like, who does that? Like, and yet at the same time, there's no, like, nobody's strapped down to this thing. There's no, like, if somebody leaves, the first thing we tell them is like, we want to bless you on the way out. We want you to know that we have open arms if you want to come back. You can come in and out. We want commitment because that helps build something, but also Base Church isn't going to be for everybody. When this sort of stuff happens, you begin to recognize God is doing something very special in the people of our church. I'd love for just a brief discussion on what you guys think is causing this to happen. What are the makings for people in our church that are trying to get themselves there? And we don't, by the way, we don't need everybody in our church going, I would go anywhere. And there's no, you can't build off of that kind of environment either. In fact, we're not even here to just champion the work of lead, local, smaller group, kids, pastors. Like, these are not the most famous or, again, everybody's an equal playing field. We need committed people that are working in marketplace vocations, that are doing a good job reaching their people that are far from God in their workplaces. We don't need to turn this into, if you can become a pastor, you're an all-star in our church. In fact, there are so many rock stars in our church that will never become pastors, and we love them just the same. They're doing incredible work right where they find themselves. But for those that are looking, trying to figure out, this is nuts in our church, or maybe a pastor that's watching going, how does this stuff start to begin to happen in a church? How can I cultivate this in my church? Let's have a 5-minute discussion, so don't take too much time on reflection, but tell me a little bit about what you're seeing has contributed to that.
It's interesting because I think that one of the biggest elements of it is kind of going back to that idea of like demotion and promotion. And what are people striving after? I think in the same way that when we talk about shifting seats, we're not talking about demotions. We're also not talking
on the bus.
Yeah, you're still on the bus. We're also not talking about promotion either. And I think one of the biggest, like, and I had a couple people come up to me like more, you know, like startup minded, some university students. They're like, yo, man, big moves. This is huge. And I'm like, dude, it's not like I'm kind of doing the same thing in different places, like in so many ways. It's like, it's just continuing to serve. And I think that the defining thing of those that I feel like are on that bus in a lot of ways, and so many of our leaders in our church, is there's so many people that aren't trying to get on staff at a church. They aren't trying to have the title of pastor. They're not grinding to get to a certain place or spot in that way. It's a bunch of people who are like, I want to build something. And that just comes from like being in it, loving God, surrendering. And it's just like, I think this is what happens when you meet Jesus.
Yep.
When you meet Jesus, he sends you.
That's
it's just
right.
what happens.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's like people who are just meeting Jesus, they don't have egos, and they're like, okay, like he's sending me.
Yeah.
So if that's going to be being brought on the staff, that's great. If that's going to be continue to serve as a volunteer for the next 30, 40 years, that's awesome. Like, wait, whatever needs to be done, I'm here to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what
Right.
we've heard so many times. I'm like, that is the defining thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on that, I think it starts with a move of God in
Yeah.
people's hearts, right?
Yes.
Like I think about your stories about the vision that God gave you of the Toronto skyline, and I think about your stories of about Waterloo and all the high rises, and I think even just in my own life about a conference that I was at where God placed a real vision of the church in Canada for me, and it starts with God moving in people's hearts. I also think like attracts like. And I think that you and Emma have embodied this vision of we are going to do this and we are going to plant churches. And you bit on the vision that God gave you in a way that, not everybody does. God will speak to people, but not everybody bites on it. And I've seen you guys bite on that. And then it draws people that have that same heart and that same vision. And so I think our church is full of that now. And I think that the danger in that is that you can start really strong with that stuff and then taper off over time because it gets comfortable and you've kind of got the thing that you started going someday. And now you're living in the someday. And I think what I've always seen you and Emma do well is go, and this is just the beginning of the next thing. This is not an end state. And even as Beth and I are coming over to Bloomingdale, you want to honor all that God has done and go, behold, I'm doing a new thing. Like this year one, we're in year one of what God is going to continue to do with all the history, So I think it's both. It starts with God. I think you guys have beautifully carried that heart and vision to send out. And I think you're exactly right, Nate. It's not about promotion or demotion or anything. I had the same experience and it surprised me. People came over and were like, hey, congratulations. And I was like, congratulations on what? Like, it's the same thing. Like, what are you talking about? I had somebody ask me on Sunday, like, how did you know that God was calling you into full-time ministry? And the answer is always the same. It's the only thing that changed in coming on staff at Slate back in the day was I had more time to build church and I made less money. Nothing else changed. My heart had been the same. My desires were the same. And so to your point, it's all these people gathering around that, not around titles or promotion or anything like that.
Yeah. Really quick story.
For every pastor leading, tell the story, but every pastor that's listening, find more people to come on staff where they can say the only thing that changed was I had more time and less money. The amount of pastors that will message me and be like, hey, do you have a worship leader or you have and I'm just like, build these people.
Yes.
Right.
Raise them up
within your house.
Yeah.
We're all doing this because we've all been a part of the same church. We're going to raise up more people that are part of the same church.
Yeah.
Find more people where ministry is being done, whether in a paid capacity or in a vocation capacity. But the ministry, the sending out is happening regardless of where they're being sent out. And the only thing that changes is hopefully not too much less money. We should pay people better in the church, and we're trying to get there as a church ourselves. But hopefully it means I just get more time to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
What's the story?
I was going to say, I loved, even Emma's heart was so much so that she never wanted to expect being on staff. But there was a certain point in these conversations where we're talking behind the scenes, and I was like, I just need to know that Emma actually would want to be on staff at some point.
Right.
And so I remember saying, I was like, hey, would you actually want to work for the church? So she's like, oh yeah, more than anything. She's like, but I just never want to have that expectation.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm doing my master's, I'm building this career, I'm doing all these other things. So I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm going to build the church and pastor people no matter what. I never want to expect that I would be on staff. I was like, okay, good. I just need to know that you'd actually want to do this.
Yeah.
And it's that same heart, which is so cool to see in you guys as well.
Yeah, I was going to comment on even just an encouragement to those people who are okay, I have this heart for this church. I have this heart to even be in ministry. What do I do with that? And it's just not losing sight of the opportunity that you have right now.
Come on.
If you're a home-based leader, you're a pastor.
Yeah.
If you're serving on a team, you have an opportunity to pastor people coming to the space. And like you said, I was going to talk about with Emma is she was treating her her serving like it was on staff, and I've never seen someone do it so well.
Yeah.
And even for myself working facilities, there's been times where I've had to I'm just cleaning the bathroom again kind of thing, and I had those moments, but it built me obviously to this moment where I can say I want to say yes. And it didn't start when you guys first brought it up. Like, I didn't just say, okay, I'm going to be a pastor now, but that's something that's been on my heart for a while because of just taking advantage of those opportunities that God has placed me in. And that's like only reason why I feel like I'm where I am is because like not losing sight of those opportunities. And
faithful with a little, you'll be given more. It's almost like there's a parable about that. And like God designed it that way, you know, like be faithful is what God's placed in your hand, and he will give you more. You know, we can use that in our finance series all across churches in Canada, but it is primarily a parable about the kingdom of God and people being entrusted with the kingdom of God. And if you bury it, man, have I been tempted? Have we all been tempted to bury it? You know, there's times where I'm like, maybe the Eastern Orthodox Church is right. And it's like, you're tempted to bury it, you know, like, or even what we're doing is right. And what we learn in that parable, it's better to do something with what he's given you than just bury it.
Yeah, very true.
Like, if you're wrong, God will align all that in the end. But if you're pointing people towards Jesus, and that's the chief end of what you're doing as a church, he will multiply it.
Yeah, it's good.
And keeping yourself humble in the process. Brian, close us off with some of your reflections on how does this culture come about?
It's interesting. The culture was the thought I had, because as you were talking about promotion and demotion, I was glad yesterday nobody came to me and said, does this mean you're going to retire? And so actually I think it's a testament that our church is not even thinking about that now. They're not looking toward what's in it for me now. I've done my time. Surely Brian's done his time. Now he's going to just go and relax and that kind of thing. And it's like, no, we're going to keep serving the kingdom, whether we're young and starting out or we're older and continuing on. And so I think it's getting that kingdom mindset of we're here on this earth for Jesus. And we want other people to know Jesus. And so we're going to live and use every breath that we have and every opportunity to just keep introducing Jesus. And I really think it's catching on more and more in our church. And so people are hungry to show up at gatherings or be a part of a home base or bring their gifts and say, how can I serve and where can I serve? And because Jesus is at the center of Base Church. And so as we keep pointing people toward him, it's endless what we're going to do with them.
It's good, man.
Hey, 2 quick notes for pastors or leaders in other churches. If anything that we're talking about in this conversation has interested you, or you want to know more because you want to build well within your church, we have an incredible opportunity for you coming up. We have Base Conference in September. You can go to basecon.church or even just base.church and go to our events page to find BaseCon. We run this as kind of a day-and-a-half conference to build the church. This year's theme is The Harvest is Plentiful. And we want to talk about when Jesus says the workers are few and to pray for them. And then he sends the same people that we're praying as the workers in the harvest field, what it looks like to be prepared for the harvest that is happening right now. And we see it across all of our locations. The growth we're seeing isn't isolated to our church. We're seeing it across the church in Canada. And so we'd love to invite you out to that. It's just a next step to being around more of these types of conversations. We have some friends joining us, but a lot of us are also going to be leading a lot of some of those breakouts, and you're going to hear some more of that Base Church perspective. And then for people that go to Base Church, also make sure you've already signed up for BaseCon, because it's not just for the church, it's also for our church. But we will just want to thank you for trekking with us as a church. As much as, it can be easy to come to church and make it into this consumer mentality. We don't have that at Base Church. You're a bunch of contributors. And we want to thank you for contributing to the church to the point where we get to rearrange some of the seats on the bus for the next leg of the journey. And the next leg of the journey looks very exciting. And you can continue to help this transition, all the transitions that we're talking about here, by just being a positive voice in the room. When you need information, not coming about it cynically, but going to the right source to get the answers and the information that you need, and carrying that with you. Even pointing people back to this conversation could help somebody that maybe is questioning some stuff. But if you're in that position to want to build and contribute to what's happening at Base Church, the best thing you can do on the other side of this announcement is to carry the torch, to support the location pastors that are now in place, to support Pastor Brian and Rebecca as they continue to bring health to our growing home base. If 81, you think 81 right now is big, just wait until another year from now. But continue to support them and what they're doing. Base Church, we love you. All the other leaders, pastors tuning in, thank you for the work that you're doing in the places you find yourself. We love you. Talk soon.